with these few words, I would like to invite Dr. Alok Pandey. Dr. Alok Pandey is a medical doctor, psychiatrist, retired wing commander from the Indian Air Force. He has authored several books such as Veda of the Body, Death, Dying and Beyond, Patient at the Crossroads, and many others. He's also the editor of a monthly and quarterly yoga journals, and he's also a motivational speaker. So some of the journals that he's editing and that is worth subscribing to are Namaha. Namaha is an acronym of New Approaches to Medicine and Health. The other journal that he is editing, the other magazine that he's editing, is the All India magazine. Both of these are published from the Sri Aurobindo Society. So Dr. Alok Pandey, or whom I found fondly referred to as Alok Bhai, we have many years of association since he is presently residing at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram, and that's the place where I have grown up. So this is another kind of a bond that we share. Alok Bhai has been there for the last 16, 17 years since he retired from the Air Force. And today he's going to talk about a very, very important topic, which is the art of life and death. André Riel, a few days back, had spoken about this topic, which is more than ever relevant today in the times of the pandemic, where we are all asked to, we are all called upon to ask these questions to ourselves. What really is living, and what happens when uh, we all have the collective stress of possible death. So, with these few words, I would invite all of you. Alok Bhai is a wonderful speaker. So, please allow yourselves to listen to this and feel free to ask your questions. You please put your questions down in the Q&A box that is there. Please don't write it in the chat box so much so that there's no confusion. You can put your questions in the Q&A box. We are also going to request you to mention the country or the place from where you have logged in, so that we know how far and wide this message is reaching. So, with these few words, Alok Bhai, a very, very warm welcome. Great privilege to have you here, and we're eagerly looking forward to your words of wisdom on the subject. Thank you.
Namaste. It's, of course, a joy and a privilege, and it's a very happy thing to see how we are getting more and more connected at another level because of all this pandemic which is going on. A day must come, it will come, when we'll be connected at a still deeper level, and we can probably dispense with the use of any technology. Two things or three things this pandemic has brought home to us. One is the fear of death, which is ingrained in human nature. The second is the fragility of human existence. And the third is the illusion of progress. I mean, there are many other things. And so far, we have been looking at all these three questions about human existence, mainly from the outward point of view. But there is a inner dimension to it, which is what we are going to speak about. So let me start with a little story, and the story is about, it's a well-known story. The story is from the Mahabharata, when Yudhishthir confronts a yaksha. Now, not going into the details of the story, the yaksha asks him many questions, and yaksha is none else but Dharmaraj, the one who keeps the balance of the worlds, and is also the god of death. And at the end, there is a question which is asked of Yudhishthir, and the question is, Kim Ascharyam? What is the most surprising thing in the world? And the answer that Yudhishthir gives is a cryptic answer, and he says that every day we see a lot of people who are dying, but we ourselves believe that we are not going to die. Now, this answer can be seen in two ways, as with many of these mystic stories. One way is that, well, death is the reality of existence, and we just don't acknowledge it, we don't understand it, it's like the last judgment on our life. And the other is that, well, death, regardless of death, there is within us a innate sense of immortality that we carry. And we can look at it either way. So, one is that on the surface, when we look at the phenomena of life, there is this constant disintegration, constant, re-emergence of things. Death is a constant process of life, actually. Even at the most material level, we see it. At every level, we see it. At the material level, at a psychological level. We can't advance to the next level of our journey without dying. The mystics know it very well. If we want to advance to another level of consciousness, not just experience it, but permanently have a station there, then we need to die to the old. Of course, Sri Aurobindo speaks about ultimately integrating all the levels. But to start with, if we stay with the old consciousness, the new consciousness no more there. So, death is part of human existence at a psychological level, at the cosmic level, and of course at the physical level also. Within a lifetime, there are several times that each cell dies. In fact, none of the cells are the same as we grow older, or shall I say wiser? I don't know. Sometimes the line is very thin between the two. So, this is a process. So, first thing we need to remember or understand is that death is not the opposite of life. It's a process of life. Another thing which we need to understand is that lot of times, because death stares at our existence, we want to know about death, we want to know about life, we spend a lot of time in reading, debating, discussing. But as this virus has shown us something very interesting, the fragility of human existence. We don't know when we are going to die. So at one level we can say that we have a lot of time to live. At another level we can say that we really don't know how soon and when. And when time is short, then we don't spend time in debating and discussing, but we spend time in knowing, experiencing, becoming, being. This is what makes a difference between two categories of human beings. One who debate and discuss about whether there is something after death or not, and the other where they go ahead, they pierce through the veil and actually experience if there is a reality like that or not. And it makes a whole lot of difference. You see, we have a story of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlad, a very symbolic story. It comes in the Bhagavad Purana and the Vishnu Purana. And as the story goes, there are two ways that these two gentlemen, father and son, they take on the challenge of life and the challenge of death. To Hiranyakashipu, the way to conquer death is to remove all the conditions which create death. So, he takes a near impossible boon that I should die in the morning, at night, inside, outside, below, above, all kinds of astra, shastra. So this is the modern science, this story is very symbolic, where we are trying to eliminate all the conditions of death. Now, even if we eliminate all the conditions, death finds its way, and that is what the story beautifully brings home. But on the other hand, there is another approach, and that approach is typified in the story of Prahlad. And the story of Prahlad is he doesn't bother about life and death, but he bothers about one thing which alone is worth discovering, and it is the sense of the one. So for Prahlad, life is very simple, and we can really lead such a beautiful and simple life. For him, life is an expression of the one, Hari, and for him, death is an expression of the one, Hari. Narayana, the one who dwells in man and one who is everywhere. And when we lead life like that, the fear of death passes away because we discover the one consciousness behind each and everything. You see, this is and it's something very urgent. We don't realize it. I was speaking about shortage of time, so we have another very interesting story about life and death. And I love to tell stories because they are a very beautiful, simple way of communicating profound truths. And this story also comes from the Bhagavad, where we have King Parikshit, who has just about 7 days to live. Now, what does he do? Now, he tries again to lock himself up. He knows how he's going to die. So he tries everything possible, call the ambulance, call the best doctors. He's the king, everything he can do. But he is given a very wise advice. And the wise advice is that he says, King, death will find its way. So what he should do? He says, you better discover the secret of immortality. So Parikshit says that, is it possible? What is it? He says very simple, that, for 7 days he listens to the story of Bhagavat, the story of Shri Krishna, which is, of course, apart from the fact that Shri Krishna is a living reality, but the Bhagavat is narrated in such a way that there is within the story running parallel to the story of Krishna, the story of the human soul. When it is born within the mind and ego complex, and slowly it develops, faces the challenges as Krishna does, eventually it grows up to its fullness, defeats the ego self, and rediscovers itself on a cosmic plane in the battle of Kurukshetra. So the essence of the whole thing is that when we have a shortage of time, and even a one lifetime is, very frankly, it's just a fraction of a second, then the thing we must go straight to the mark is to discover that whether there is really a soul within us or not. And that is what is beautiful about Nachiketa, the whole Kathopanishad, that he asks a very significant question, a question which we should ask. We should not worry about death exists or not, or read all kinds of books, because there is a whole material science view of it, and the material science view is a phenomenal view. But science itself knows that there are truths behind phenomena, play of forces, energies, consciousness, of which at this point we have no clue. But straight away the question is, he says that some say that after death nothing exists, but others say that there is something which is immortal within us, and I would like to know the secret. And Yama says very cryptically that, well, even the gods do not know it. And the question is that why do gods do not know it? Well, gods have everything, but they don't have something which human beings have. And that something is soul, the little being described in the Upanishads very beautifully. Antaha sharire jyotirmayo hi shubra, angushta matra purusha. That little being, no bigger than the thumb of man, which resides in the center. It is our true core. In fact, that is what we are. And once we discover it, the gods don't have it. In fact, no other plane of existence it is found. It is found only on earth, embedded in the principle of matter that we find on earth. That's why it is said that yoga can be done only in a body. See, while we talk about all the, going beyond and into the nirvanic silence, but it is very interesting that all traditions will tell us that progress, discovery, this is the Vedantic idea of evolution and the 84 lakh yonis spoken about in the Tantra, that when we take different forms, then while the forms disintegrate and we take a new form, forms disintegrate, we take a new form, we the essential me, but something is happening through this process. It's not just a blind destruction and taking up of life. Often we understand that rebirth is just a question of, reward and punishment, but it's not about reward and punishment at all. That's a very human imposition on a far profound truth. Now, as these forms disintegrate, the journey continues in another body. And we can take a very simple example that, we take a vehicle, maybe a car or whatever else, and we are going to some place. And the vehicle breaks down in between. So does the journey cease? No. The person who is journeying, the traveler, the eternal traveler, steps out and he takes another car, he calls for another taxi, or he finds another means. If nothing is there, he starts walking. So something similar happens after death, that we get rid of this car. This car is the most gross vehicle. That's why it's called as a vehicle. Sometimes also called as a kosha. It's a dwelling house. It's not the householder. So this house, obviously it has a certain life limit, and this tends to break down and disintegrate, and the householder steps out. And then there are many layers. They are not just one vehicle. There are other vehicles, lighter vehicles. This is the gross vehicle. Then there are lighter and subtler vehicles made up of subtler substance, subtler energies, and finer states of matter. We can put it like that, more scientifically. And one after another, the soul travels through that. Now, the interesting part is that normally the difference between the gross and the subtle is the gross doesn't allow us to easily escape or enter into these higher worlds. It's gross, it's very heavy, it ties us down, like binds us to this earth matter with almost iron chains. But there is within this gross matter a subtler matter, something which can allow us to rise and ascend. Of course, yogis know about it while they are living, and that's what we should aim at. But ordinarily, it's after death that we discover it. What do we discover? As many instances of near-death experience have shown us, and I'm not going into these details, paucity of time, I have mentioned that in the book Death, Dying, Beyond, that when we discard the human sheath, we are not dead. The body disintegrates. So what happens to us? We discover another mode of existence. This is another way of life, another mode of living. Ordinarily, we don't know it. It's like a dream mode. We enter dream world, it's very different. The time space is very different. The means of communication are very different. The language is very different, and we know nothing about it. So we see a dream, either a beautiful dream. When it ends, we say, "Oh my God, why did it end?" Or a nightmare, and when we wake up and we say, "Oh, I'm so happy that the whole nightmare ended." But there's a whole world of dreams. In the Upanishad, we have this waking world and the dream world. Now, dream world is not just the dreams that we see, but rather a whole layers and layers of consciousness that form like a ladder. And we are not oriented to this world. We are completely disoriented, and we somehow come back to the body. But we can make it a very conscious process. After death, we are led through these subtle worlds, one after another, till we reach our very core, rediscover who we are, and that's bliss, of course. And there is a period of little rest, assimilating rest, because all the life experiences, not in their outer details, but in their essence, are gathered. It's important because, it's like, take a simple example, even sometimes 1 year life experiences, this pandemic experience, for example. One is the outer. Every day, the lockdown and distancing and all these masks we have to wear, the means of communication. But the essence of that experience, as someone would say, it's stress-inducing. Someone would say, well, it's an inward shift. Someone else would say, it gave me an opportunity to rediscover myself. So the essence of the experience is what we carry. The details are left out, because you see, much after, maybe after 5 years, 6 years, 10 years down the line, we'll forget all the details. That's why after death we forget many of these unnecessary things. But what we will remember, at least in a lifetime, is that, well, when that happened, how human nature, how human consciousness responded, how I individually responded. And that will be the take-home point. Like, there are people who during this period have intensified their spiritual aspiration. And that becomes a take-home point for us. So, when we leave the body, many of these unnecessary things, they are like crust, not unnecessary really, but feeders to the core experience. Take another example that, as a child, people go through difficult states. Let's say in a school, there was a teacher who was, and they didn't have a good time. It was a rough time. So they were crying and, wanting to avoid. But much later, this whole event and circumstances changes its value. And some of the students get back and say, "Thank you, teacher. You were very tough, but it made us in the bargain much stronger to meet life." Now, I am not advocating that teachers should be tough. There are gentler ways and more beautiful ways. But the point here is that the essence of an experience is very different than what we are going through on the surface consciousness. So we have the surface consciousness, which is the waking consciousness, the Jagrat Avastha, we have the Swapna Avastha, through which we travel, and then there is the core, the Sushupti. And then, of course, we have that ultimate Turiya, in which all these are held together, and we need not speak about it. So Sushupti is the state where all the essence is extracted. And then we come back into life to restart the journey from where we left it undone. We have to finish many other evolutionary curves. We have to take on this great challenge of life, which is actually an evolutionary challenge. It's not a threat, a stress, or anything. If we trust that there is a divine presence within creation, we have to trust that there is a wisdom which is working. Now we can look at it as a crisis, we can look at it as a challenge. So death too is a challenge. And it comes wearing a terrible mask. Disease comes wearing a terrible mask. But if we are afraid of it, then we have lost the challenge before trying it out. But instead, we should take on the challenge. And what is the best way to take on the challenge of death? Rip off the mask and ask, who are you? Many of us have grown up with this faith that there is a divine presence in life. And frankly, what is life without this basic faith? If there is no divine presence, I often say that the scientists, there is no way you can confirm or affirm it other than having experience. So there are people who deny it scientifically or logically or otherwise, but then even though they deny it, sometimes denial is a very convenient way because it saves us the effort of discovering it. It's not a belief, it's a first step towards discovering it. And frankly, when we deny it, then what is life all about? I mean, it's just dust somehow becoming man and neurons babbling inside a brain, and we try to make sense of it. Certainly, it is meaningless if you look at it from that point of view. But if there is a divine presence within, if there is a soul within, which we read in the scriptures, which mystics speak about, and if there is a path to find it, the path of yoga, we better search for it. See, so yoga is far beyond merely, some techniques and methods. They are all steps in the way. But the essence of yoga is to discover this wonderful divine presence, as Prahlad did, as many other did, and to live with that. Now, when we discover this divine presence, we enter into a state of oneness. Now, what is meant by oneness is that the sense of duality ceases to exist. So normally we have a slot and we draw a line and we put on one side life, another side death, pleasant, painful, good, bad, virtue, wise, and so on and so forth. Endless. Joy, sorrow, heat and cold and everything. All kinds of cognate experiences. Now this is duality because we try to shun one and accept the other. In ignorance, it has a purpose. But when we discover oneness, then we discover that what we call as pain, what we call as pleasure, behind both, there is a deeper truth which is trying to express itself. And that truth is, as the Upanishad says, the delight of existence. The closer we come to the soul, the more we experience this wonderful joy and peace. Self-existence, joy and peace. It's given to us. We don't need to ask from anyone. In fact, we have abundant to share with the whole world, and still it will not cease to be, because this joy draws its breath from infinity. Right now we are looking for finite ways, and that's why death comes, because we experience life on the basis of finiteness. So there is limitation. But deep within is a birth, the soul within us, which actually comes from infinity. Deep inside it is connected to infinity. But it is experienced life in a finite way. How can it ever be happy? So, the soul of course is happy, but it's never satisfied with the experience. It wants more, more, more. And so life after life, it's trying to recapture this infinity in countless ways. Then a time comes. It's like, outside we try to amass wealth and we just think that when people don't have much money, so if you ask them how much you need, they say just a little more. When they have a little more, they say, well, maybe a little more. And then it goes on. And then even when everything is there, then there is still that little more which is left. Because that little more is not outside us. That little more is within us. It's within our own soul. And if we discover it, we open to infinity. We inherit infinite love, infinite existence, infinite consciousness, infinite peace, infinite delight. Krishna, Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, all these are various ways of expressing a deep, profound truth. Krishna is infinite Ananda, Shiva is infinite force, Brahma is infinite existence, Vishnu is infinite consciousness. And when the soul discovers it, then it has no more need for any outer things. Yes, they enrich life, but they are not really needed in that way. And second interesting thing is we stop putting things in slots. We discover that life and death are one single thing. They are not, in fact, there is no two things in this world. Anuradha was reminding me some time back that this is the 10th day of the session. Well, 10th day, and she said, what is the significance of the word 10? Well, the whole world from computer technology to the origin is a play of 1 and 0. And this 1 and 0 is basically, if we remove the 1, then world is 0. It's, so people who speak about the world being futile and death being real, basically they have not discovered the 1. Because, yes, it is futile, it is vain, it is zero in spite of everything. As I said, the fragility of human existence that stares at our face. But the day we add 1 to it, then the 0 becomes 10. It is a number of fullness. It brings us, it completes the whole cycle. But 0 to 10, we have to travel a whole journey. We have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So we first discover 1. So 0 is behind, 1 is there. So we make a distinction between world and God. 0 we have to leave behind, and 1 is here. So we have the illusionist, idea of life that, this world existence is vain, meaningless, discover the 1. Then we go to 2. We discover there is the soul and the ego. Then we go to 3. We discover that there is within the ego the mind, life and body. Then we discover 4. There is a 4th hidden plane of existence. Then we discover 5, the very ultimate bliss that has built the world. And 6, which is consciousness which stands behind bliss, the divine mother of whom, the consciousness force of whom this whole world is a wonderful expression. And then we discover 7, the sevenfold being, the Satchidananda through all the 7 planes of existence. And then we discover 8. It is the higher hemisphere and the lower. When they come together, then we have the perfection of life. It's a figure of infinity. 8, you just put it other way, it's infinite. And then we have 9. 9 is a return. You see, it is 0 and 1 fusing in a strange way. So 1 has come back. You see, sometimes these figures, I'm talking of the English language, but it's so interesting that now we are returning back to the material plane, having discovered the 2 hemispheres and the infinity. And then there is a reversal. 1 is behind and 0 is in front. So the meaning of 0 changes. So that's some kind of divine mathematics, as I say. And then, of course, there is 11 and 12, which completes the whole figure. So 11 is where we discover the oneness within us, and everything else is an expression of the one. And 12 is, of course, the ultimate perfection. So this is an approach to life which frees us not only from fear of death, but the reality of death. When we discover this one, then death becomes unreal. We can use the word death dies. You see that story of Sphinx, where Odysseus must travel, Oedipus must travel through the desert, Thebes, and he encounters Sphinx. And Sphinx is a strange creature with the body of a lion and wings of a bird and face of a woman. And she asks every traveler that, answer my question. If you answer correctly, well, you survive. If you don't, you die. And everybody is confused. The question is, who is the creature who walks on 4 legs in the morning and 2 in the afternoon and 3 in the evening? And then Oedipus is the one who gives the answer. And he says, I am the answer. So this I, this constant I, outwardly we think this I is the ego self. But when we discover the soul within, we discover that behind this I, which was a shadow I, there is a true I. Now, very beautifully it is captured in one of Sri Aurobindo's poem, and I feel tempted to recount this story of the Sphinx. Religion is going into the background and science is in the forefront. And religion tells science that though I am going behind, you also must face the question of the Sphinx. The Sphinx that waits for thee beside the way. All questions thou mayest answer but one day. Her questions shall await thee that reply, for they who cannot die. She slays them and their mangled bodies lie upon the highways of eternity. Therefore, if thou wouldst live, answer first this one thing, who art thou in this dungeon laboring? So, I think this is the first fundamental question, who am I? And everything, all other answers come from that. If I am an ephemeral existence, if I am just matter, if I am a bundle of neurons, if I am dust, then really speaking, nothing else makes sense. One day I'll die like everybody else. But going through layers and layers of inquiry, we discover that there is within us an eternal, immortal self, and then death dies for us. Now, what is this immortal self? Just quickly, how do we discover it? Now, where is its seat? Where is it located? Now, it's not located within the body, though we say that the soul is within the body. But the reality is, we can put it like that actually the soul is the master. It can attach to the body, it can detach itself from the body, and when there is a developed soul, the body is within the soul. As Swami Vivekananda said so powerfully, I have spat this body. This is how the Upanishad says. Now, this is the kind of development one can reach, that we discover that it's not the soul which is within the body, but the body within the soul. But there is a seat from where we can access it, and whether we like it or not, that seat is not so easy through the mind, though we can access through many doors, but through the heart. See, very instinctively when we speak to people and say namaste, just now we said, or even when sometimes we just put a hand over the heart and say hello, we never put a hand over the head and say hello. So even when there is a gesture of reaching out, it's midway. Now, this is the seat of the soul. Very instinctively when people say I, they refer to the heart. This is where the soul resides. If you want to put it like that, this is the short route. We can go through many routes, but this is the shortest route, the path of love as it is called, or we, to this journey of love we can add a kind of process of interiorization. But how do we go within if we are tied with 100 bonds outside? The story of three men, a whole night they were rowing the boat, but it kept going round and round. It didn't budge at all. And in the morning, they were all drunk. They slept, and in the morning they got up, and the boatman came, and they said, "What kind of boat is this? Whole night I was rowing, nothing happened." And the boatman says, "But you didn't take off the string from the, from the shore. You have to do that for the boat to advance." So much of our processes is like that we try to go within, we set aside half an hour, 1 hour practice, and then the rest of the day we do everything to tie the boat with many, many anchors. And so naturally we can't go within. So fundamentally we must learn, practice this bit of detachment from outer existence. And this detachment is not about outer renunciation, as the Gita says, but an inner tyaga. We don't have to leave anything, but we have to change our relation with it. Our relation can be a very egoistic relation. This is me, this is mine. I possess it, I hold it. So then naturally one day the ropes will be cut and we'll feel pain. But those who are detached, they are freed from the pain of death. Why? Because, in fact, from all pain. Because they've lived their life like that this is today with me, tomorrow it will pass into other hands. So I must take care of things, of people, of relationships. The famous Yagnavalk that, one does not love the wife for the sake of the wife, but for the sake of the self. One does not love the country for the sake of the country, but for the sake of the self. So our orientation changes. It's not me and mine, it belongs to the Lord. Isha vasyamidam sarvam, all this is for the habitation of the Lord. Yat kincha jagatyam jagat, all that is individual motion within the universe. And it gives us a profound truth. Tena tyaktena bhunjita magrida kasya siddhanam. So by renouncing, thou wouldst enjoy. So the first thing in life is, which is a paradox, life meets, life is full of paradoxes. And in resolving these paradoxes, we discover the secret, we solve the puzzle, the riddle, but we keep on saying either or. So that's where we lose out on the real meaning. But this paradox can be resolved. Sri Aurobindo puts it beautifully, our life is a paradox with God for key. So now how exactly we go about it? That detachment from surface things, a certain degree of detachment. Now, what it is meant is not shunning anything outwardly, but to change our relation. My love for country is not for my own sake, just because I am born there, but because this nation is required for a greater work. And all nations have their own work to do. So there can be a very aggressive nationalism, a titanic kind, and there can be a very Daivik kind of nationalism, where we look at country as a means to serve a larger purpose in humanity. And so also with the family, we can look at family as my own and possess them, as be dominant over them, or we can understand that each member in our family is meant to express something of the divine. Let me create an environment, an atmosphere which is conducive for the person to grow. And the same way we can look at our own life as a means to achieve this, that, etc., etc. Or we can look at it much deeper, that the value of all these so-called achievements lies in the fact that how much I have discovered myself, dropped off the ego self and discovered my true self. And this is the direction in which all our journey must go. So first thing is detachment. The second, a very beautiful practice which helps is Nishkam Karma. We all know about it. When we do Nishkam Karma, then the Gita says so beautifully, when we live this life remembering that the divine alone is true, then after we have reached a point, we are so free within that we remember the divine, and we can be straight away lost into a state of freedom. So it in fact gives that injunction that live this life remembering the divine, and so when the time comes to drop off the mortal sheaths, the coils, the outer body, the house, then we are not worried or afraid because we have already discovered the one. So, this practice of remembrance and offering everything to the divine is a way that we are trying to connect with the one truth. So, you see, this practice of discovering the soul is not just a technical process. It won't work only as a technique, but it's a package. So, when we are sitting and eating, am I eating only for the joy of the palate? Well, pleasure of the palate is there. It's not that one has to mix everything, make a khichdi and eat. But at the same time, the food is an offering to the deity, divine within, and therefore it becomes prasad. That is the whole idea of going to a temple and receiving prasad. It's a symbol that whatever we receive in life, whether it be a material gift, whether it be food, annam, or it's anything else, relationship, everything is a gift of the divine and we receive it like this. Knowing fully well, keep the hands open. Don't close the hand. This is mine. The moment we do it, like water slipping from our fingers or sunlight changing into shadow, it will go away. So we need to live with this state that we receive as a gift. Don't close the hands. With gratitude in our hearts that everything comes as a gift from the Lord, we take it. Remember and offer is another beautiful doctrine. And the third practice which Gita speaks about is equanimity. So when we lead our life like that, and then we engage into a process of interiorization, where we go within, setting apart a time every day, concentrating in the center of the chest anywhere. It doesn't really matter. The divine is not a slave of a technique. He knows the secret intent in the heart of the seeker. All who ever found him, take the name of anyone from Mirabai, I've spoken about Prahlad, to Bhakt Dhruv, to many others, countless Surdas and medieval saints, the entire great masters, Sikh masters, Kabir and everybody. What was it? It was not so much about technique. Today we talk about it in this way. But they were burning with a fire to find. And how did they make this fire grow? Simply by the name of God, Nam, as it is called. Of course, I'm not going into the deeper understanding of Nam, but just the name of the name divine. It is the original vibration which is captured. I mean, the name, what is really name, foundation of eternity? There is the original vibration which we cannot capture. No human tongue can utter it. But this original vibration manifests in certain bodies, certain beings, and their name becomes one with the name. That name itself represents. So we can take a mantra as a means to go within. Its mantra has that vibration. Or even simply Krishna, Rama, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Shri Arvindaha Sharanam Mama, Ma Mira Sharanam Rama. Or simply Ma, Onkar. 100,000 ways. And if we take that as an aid and we live our life concentrated in the heart with a will to find that presence inside, that burning splendor, that immortality in the cloak of death, that eater of the honey, as the Kathopanishad puts it, that which is like a swan, which can with one look distinguish the true from the false, that whose very nature is delight because it's the birth child, offspring of delight, offspring of immortality. So if we find it, then life is wonderful and death is no more something frightening, but death is simply a passage, a step, a stride through which we pass towards immortality. Avidyam mrityum tirtva vidyam amritam ashnute. Isha Upanishad. So let me close with some lines from Sri Aurobindo, from Savitri. As I love to do, we know Savitri is one of, it's the longest epic in English language, but it is an epic of 24,000 lines, which is marvelous. It's based on the story of Savitri and Satyavan, but Sri Aurobindo has put a whole cosmos within it, everything that we need to know or understand is there. So I just read just one page, on page 600, 601. I'll not go into this its deeper sense because otherwise I'll forget time. But Maya is a veil of the Absolute. A truth occult has made this mighty world. The Eternal's wisdom and self-knowledge act in ignorant mind and in the body's steps. The inconscient is the superconscient sleep. An unintelligible intelligence invents creation's paradox profound. Spiritual thought is crammed in matter's forms. This is the original Veda which we need to discover. Unseen, it throws out a dumb energy and works a miracle by a machine called the body. All here is a mystery of contraries. Darkness, a magic of self-hidden light. Suffering, some secret rapture's tragic mask, and death an instrument of perpetual life. Although death walks beside us on life's road, a dim bystander at the body's start, and a last judgment on man's futile works, other is the riddle of its ambiguous face. Death is a stair, a door, a stumbling stride this soul must take to cross from birth to birth, a grey defeat pregnant with victory. A whip to lash us towards a deathless state. The inconscient world is the spirit's self-made room, eternal night, shadow of eternal day. Night is not our beginning nor our end. She is the dark mother in whose womb we have hid, safe from too swift waking to world pain. We came to her from a supernal light. By light we live, and to the light we go. Thank you so much. I'm going to answer this in a paradoxical way, not from a mystic point of view, but there was a book called Illusions by Richard Backhand. And as we know in the book, there is a very interesting line which is said that if you are alive, your work is not over. So, it's a paradoxical answer that at what point you decide you have to withdraw. Well, we don't decide. Those who have left themselves in the hands of the divine, they see when the decision is made by the ego, either of living or of death, it's a false choice. I won't say the wrong choice. Wrong choice is something else. It's a false choice because it's made by something within us which is false by its very nature. But when we discover the soul within, we also become aware of the divine will. So when we act in accordance with the divine will, a yogin may very well know, he becomes aware of the divine will operating in the cosmos, in creation, and so his decisions are not made based on the ego self. And we have the classic example of the Gita, where Arjuna is called upon to make a choice. He wants to make a choice based on the ego self to fight and then recoil also from the ego self, because he will be the cause of this and that. But Krishna bids him to rise beyond both these standpoints and says that our work is to express the divine will. And isn't the divine will expressing itself in countless ways all the time, which is a moment when we can say that the divine will has stopped expressing itself. So till our last breath, we should express the divine will. Even our breathing should be an act of gratitude and love. Then a time comes when the divine will within us may be to withdraw, to take on a new body, a new way of challenge. And then it should be done, which is not euthanasia, it's not running away from pain, suffering, work. Rather, we should want to come back 1,000 times, as the Srimad-Bhagavatam says. Come back 1,000 times to serve. But this decision should not be made by the surface consciousness, by the ego self. If we do from the ego self, either to live or die, it's false. So it's not either or, but expressing the divine will, which we can know by coming in contact with the soul. Yes? Okay, so first of all, I very consciously corrected that. I said, is the symbol, I said, it is a reality. He is a reality already. Didn't use the word already, but he is a reality, but the story runs parallel also as a symbol. It's true of most of the mystic stories like Ramayana. Rama is a reality. Reality both of a physical world where Rama the incarnate came, Krishna the incarnate came, and Krishna is a reality whom none can deny. He's mentioned even historically. Krishna, for example, is mentioned in Mahabharata, Harivansh, Bhagavat Purana. He's mentioned in Chandogya Upanishad. Now, Krishna is also, he has come, taken a human birth and lived his human exploit. But there is also the reality of Krishna which transcends. He reveals in the Gita that I am Purushottama. I am the Lord beyond the Shara and Akshara. And then there is another reality of Shri Krishna, that he is the indwelling divine within the heart of all creatures, Narayana, and whom we can discover. So the story of Bhagavat and the story of Ramayana runs on several levels, and we can see it at all these levels. Just to end with because of the time, one of the Kabir's doha from Ramayana, not from Ramayana, but about Ramayana, he says, Ek Ram दशरथ का बेटा, एक राम है जगत पसारा, एक राम घट घट का बासी, एक राम है सबका न्यारा. So the avatar is also the one who is indwelling divine, and is also the one who is the cosmic being, and is also the transcendent sabse nyara. So Krishna is all these, and let me say much more than whatever human tongue can utter and whatever human souls can discover. He is the endless, fathomless, infinite delight. He is always in the Param Dham, as well as he is always here upon earth. And we can come in contact with him. That's all I would say. Yeah. Yes. So that's a very, very valid question. And I think I have already given enough hints in the process. Now, as I said, it's not something which can be immediately answered. It can be answered, but it's a long process. I have given hints. For those who are interested, please feel free to email me. My email is with Anuradha, to put it in a simple way. And I would be very happy to answer this question at any length. But the other part of it, when Shri Krishna says, because this is often quoted, Gita and many of these scriptures are, we pick up a sentence. Now, if we really look at this particular statement, people have asked me that, well, is death real or not? Shri Krishna is saying, Jatasya dhruvasya mrityu. Now, actually, Shri Krishna is beginning to develop an argument. Now, how does Arjuna approach him? He starts with the intellectual mind. So he is replying to the intellectual that, well, that's how it is, that one who is born dies. That's what we experience every day. So in that case, why are we really worried about death? We should worry about something which doesn't happen and may happen in my life. So one who is born dies. And if that be the truth of existence, intellectually speaking, frankly speaking, we should not focus on death and means of, how to really keep it away, but focus on life, how to live beautifully. And the whole gospel of Gita is about how to live beautifully, so much so that even if the next moment we were to drop dead on a battlefield, our life will still be worthwhile. So Arjuna heard the Gita, Abhimanyu actually lived it. If you really look at it like that. So we have to look at this is the beginning of the argument. This is not the end. Where does it end? The grand culmination. It ends on the mystery of oneness. Sarva dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja'where, where Shri Krishna is revealing himself in all its splendor and glory. Aham toa sarva papebhyo mokshishyami masucha means the fear of death and all other fears. Vanish from the eyes of the one who has surrendered to the divine. So we go to that point, starts with Gyana Yoga, Karma Yoga, and then Bhakti Yoga, and in this grand culmination. So this is only one part, the beginning of the whole gospel. But we have to see where it leads us. It leads us to infinity. Okay? Thank you. Okay. So, again, the detailed answer I have given in several places. Aroma.org, there is a whole talk on Sri Aurobindo's Mahasamadhi. But so I'll not go into all the details, but to put it very simply, one, death as we understand is the death of the body. But death as a yogin understand doesn't exist because he has discovered the consciousness of immortality. I'm glad for bringing out this question. So both Sri Aurobindo and the mother describes it categorically. And Sri Aurobindo in Savitri describes he steps into a place where one could not even breathe. There is no breath, there is no heartbeat. And very consciously he has entered into that domain of death. And the mother, of course, is described at least twice when she completely, what is called as even death of the body that has happened, and she has come back. So they had both experienced death and the consciousness of immortality, of course, and the consciousness of the infinite, which the Vedic and the Upanishadic seers sought after because they were after the truth of immortality. But what was not yet achieved was the immortality of the body, which is a thing very different from immortality. We speak about immortality as the body's immortality. That's the last and crowning thing in a whole series of events. And Sri Aurobindo's withdrawal, to put it very simply, a very conscious decision, was to hasten ultimate victory or the achievement of immortality immortality of the very body. So his, what we call as death, like, Shri Krishna's withdrawal from Vrindavan, it released upon earth pangs of bhakti which we don't find in the Vedas and the Upanishads. They are hinted but not found. But the moment Krishna goes away from this, from Vrindavan, we see that human heart is filled with bhakti. Why? Because it misses the Godhead whose touch it has felt. So Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's withdrawal, if I may add, is precisely to prepare humanity to reach that point, to become worthy of receiving that great gift that they want to give us. But physical immortality, isolated physical immortality, was never Sri Aurobindo's aim. And he also said that that is not possible at the most gross physical levels. Subtle physical levels, yes, which is what he and the mother have stationed themselves at. But physical immortality at the most outer physical means conquest over all the laws of material existence which govern our physical constitution. Now for that, a certain degree of humanity, a certain number, if I may say so, have to be ready. And that is a process which is going on. Already man's mind is turning in that direction. And so we have to wait for that last act in the great drama. The last act of Sri Aurobindo's and the mother's life, the last scene, if I may say so, does not close on 5th December 1950 or 17th November 1973. It's the beginning of Book 2. And in which we have to play a major part, and with them in the background directing the whole play. So there will be the book 3, where the two will meet, and man himself physically will taste immortality. So this is in a nutshell, but details you'll find on aroma.org, all about Sri Aurobindo's withdrawal, the mother's withdrawal, and everything else. Okay. Yeah. So maybe, paucity of time, we will probably, maybe if possible, keep it as the last question, and welcome to write, and as I said, check with the website. But coming to the question first, the Buddhist question which speaks about no soul, but of the permanent. So anatma of the Buddha is not about that there is no divine reality. He didn't use the word, he didn't believe in metaphysical speculations, and quite rightly, because we end up, creating a whole philosophy around it rather than living the experience. So Buddha is right in his own way that he refused to discuss metaphysical questions, but showed a way to discover the permanent. I think as to individual soul, there has always been these two kinds of doctrines. One is about the multiplicity of soul. Even in pure Advaita, it is there. There is nothing like an individual soul. But if you read Visishta Advaita and you take to Dvaita, you discover that there is a reality of multiplicity of soul, basically coming from Sankhya. The Gita endorses it. Sri Aurobindo endorses it. Now, the thing is, take very logically, if there is no individual soul, frankly, there is no yoga. What do we do? Who is doing the yoga? Who is bound? Who is free? Why put any effort? So, the whole thing is an absurdity and the whole argument collapses. That's maybe a very summary way of putting it, but, intellectually, because I went through all these questions myself when in my medical college. Why yoga? Why put all this effort if there is nothing individual? That was the time I was reading through all these scriptures and all these things. I was reading medicine also, just, so that people don't think. So this is one part of it. Second is, yes, how do we know that soul is of this size or that size? By seeing it. So all the yogis, what they name, have said that metaphysical speculations or metaphysical understanding is purely an intellectual exercise. We may or may not need it. There are people I know who have felt their soul touch without understanding a word about it. So because we are intellectuals or mental beings, we need to have a framework. It's human concession given to man. But we don't need to shift from physical to metaphysical. We need to shift from the physical to the real. And this not to say that the physical is unreal, but it is to say that the physical is an instrument of the real. How do we do it? And that's what we have just hinted upon. First important thing is to want it. If all our life we are wanting this and that and 100 things, and one day we wake up when it's post-retirement that let me find out about my soul, probably it's too late. Maybe Yamaraja will come and show us the soul, because that's one way to discover the soul. But when we are young, when we are full of energy, and by young I don't mean in age is not a number, but young means we are wanting to progress. We have the urge. There are yogis who at 73 have realized the divine. And Sri Ramakrishna says, and the mother testifies, it needs 3 days of concentrated effort. That's all that is required. We must burn with this fire that I want to find my soul. It must be like the great the bird with its wings hovering over us all the time, whether we eat, sleep, meet, but we are all the time lost in these multiple identities. I belong to this religion, as I said. I'm a Buddhist, I'm a practicing Hindu, I'm a Muslim, I'm Christian, and I'm a non-believer. This is also an identity. I'm an atheist, I'm a theist. All these identities, I'm a German, French, Indian, American, white, black, all these false identities of the ego. I'm a surname, I'm a doctor, I'm an engineer. When we get rid of all these, then we have an opportunity to discover that which is within us, who assumes countless names and form. And actually, if you believe in the doctrine of rebirth, then we have to bring in the individual soul. If there is no rebirth, what is reborn? Buddhism does believe in rebirth. So what comes back? Of course, I am aware that it talks about the stream of river passing through. The bed is the same, but in that case, there is one consciousness experiencing all this. Then we don't have to worry about it, neither papa nor punya, because there is no individual soul which is experiencing it. But if we do believe in the doctrine of rebirth, as enunciated in the Gita, as enunciated in some other schools of thought, as of course enunciated by Sri Aurobindo and the mother, then spontaneously it becomes a great need. It should become a burning, if I may use the word desire, though desire doesn't apply here, an aspiration. I must find it. Doesn't matter. We may be walking, sitting in the bathroom, we may be reading a book, we may be engaged in any activity. I must find my soul. Then one day, because of this intense aspiration, our whole nature, consciousness becomes one block like a laser. And it cuts through the layers and we discover what was always there. Antaha sharire Gyothermal hishubro. But it won't come by any amount of intellectual thinking. This is the saying of all the wise, and I can only add to that yes, it's so very true that intellectual speculation are all right at a point of time. That's how I started the whole thing. But at another point of time, we should not stop there and go into the discovery. I have hinted at some of the processes, but we must remember that the eagerness with which we want to find the divine within. Finding the divine within, we will have to discover the soul. It's a process. It's like the gate through which we pass. The divine is equally and much more eager to hold us. So we are very much helped and supported in the way. Of course, if we have an outer guru, wonderful. But even if we don't have, there's this inner guru who wants us to discover him. So we must know in this journey we are not alone. And if we live with this faith and we offer everything to him who is within us, the Narayana, the Vasudeva, then he has taken a number of steps already before we begin to feel the need. Somebody asked me, what is bhakti? Why does the divine want us to have bhakti? And I said, well, divine doesn't want us to have bhakti. Divine loves us, and a little bit of this love springs further. It's like, that great Niagara when the whole water falls. It splashes on our face. So, from the human consciousness, in response to this divine love, which is laboring since matter was formed or even before that, something splashes up towards the source, and that is bhakti. So, these are some of the hints. Bhakti is the shortest way, surrender is the shortest way, and it requires a leap of courage and faith. But, as I said, a detailed discussion may not be possible. Yes, Anuradha. So, yeah.
So, Alokji, there was one question on the idea of suffering, and I found something from the Savitri, which was very apt. So, he says that where Savitri is telling the Lord of Death, she says that I have given thee thy awful shape of dread and thy sharp sword of terror and grief and pain to force the soul of man to struggle for light. And thou art, no, on the brevity of his half conscious days. And the hope that she gives there at the end, she says, I am the deputy of the aspiring soul. My spirit's liberty, I ask of all.
Yes,
So we'd
yes.
like to hear your ending remarks and your message to our very engaging audience. The audience has always been very participative. They've been uh, they get really inspired to think deeply into whatever our presenters have been sharing with us. So your final words for them and
Okay, thank you, Anuradha. And first of all, about the audience, I very much sensed it. That is why all this flowed. Because as Kathopanishad says, where there is a seeker and a person who can share the wisdom, that's when there is delight is born. So definitely I sense that. My final words are that for a long time we have speculated upon these mysteries. We, especially in India, and world over, people who believe in some kind of spirituality, they do believe that these things are there, but let it not remain just a intellectual thing. Let us not just end with speculation and debate and discussion. Let us go straight to the heart of it and discover it. Now in this discovery, I want to make a little distinction between technique processes which are there and they have their own place and role to play, but the divine within is free, infinite. He is beyond all that we do and do not do. And if we can lean upon the divine, if we can trust the divine that he is also eager to reveal to us, and if we can turn to him sincerely with help, doesn't matter what name form, that you are there, and if you are there, if that wisdom is there, help me find my soul. We will be assisted. So technique processes are all right, but it can be done without them or with them. The ultimate thing, the real thing is, and core thing is aspiration for discovery of the soul, aspiration for discovery of the divine, for the one, doesn't matter what name we call it, and based on the sincerity of the aspiration, the response comes from the one who is also infinite. If my aspiration is only for some peace, peace will come. If my aspiration is to get free from suffering, I'll get free from suffering and probably find the silence of the nirvana. If my aspiration is to be in a state of delight all the time, every moment, I'll discover the delight which is behind. And if my aspiration is to be all the time in a state of union and communion with the divine, to dwell within him and to see him in all creatures, this faith and will, aspiration, will help me to, in the end, realize the divine presence in all things and be in a constant state of dwelling in the divine, which will be a most wonderful and beatific state. So, aspiration and faith, or we can put it as will and faith, are the great secret. And when we top it, crown it with surrender, then there is nothing impossible. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you very much for leaving us with those very valuable secrets and tips on living life more meaningfully and facing death more graciously. So, with these few words, I'd just like to inform our audience that for those of you who've come here for the first time, we will have all the recordings available on indicayoga.com, Indica Yoga YouTube and Facebook pages and channel. So please log on to them to listen to our previous lectures that have already taken place. Please inform your friends because we're wanting the light, we're talking of it as the light, the spiritual light to grow in these times. And each of these speakers is offering a very important, is giving a very important offering in that uh, yajna, that collective yajna that we are performing. So we had over 160 participants attending it on Zoom alone, and there are many more who are listening to it on Facebook and on YouTube. So from all their, on behalf of all of them, Alupai, on behalf of Indica Yoga, thank you very much for accepting to share on this very, very important topic. We request the rest of you to stay with us. For those also interested in knowing a little more about this topic from Sri Aurobindo's perspective, the book, The Savitri, masterwork on the discourse of Savitri, the goddess mother herself, with death, is a fascinating read. Every line of that is a gem for a lifetime. With these words, Alupai, thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.